Welcome to another edition of the Gruber Morning Show, Roadster Edition, sponsored by the Gruber Companies. Lowest mile roadster on Earth.
How to fix your key fob. That'll be an interesting one.
Dustin Hoffman's Roadster is for sale.
And Visium top quality issues.
I'm Pete Gruber.
And I'm Mark Schaffner.
These and other stories on the Roadster podcast. So opening up with more Roadsters are for sale. But before I get there, that picture behind us, again, AI generated. This is ChatGPT-4. We love AI, so we're going to give you information, hoping that you will experiment with it and have the same degree of fun and familiarity as we are. We, of course, have had the Silver Surfer Roadster here twice now. And it's the only chrome-wrapped Roadster in existence that we're aware of. It resides in San Diego or SoCal. And so what I asked for in this prompt was, give me a chrome-wrapped Roadster with fighter jets behind it on a tarmac. And this is what it came up with, and it certainly didn't disappoint.
It didn't disappoint with the fighter jets. And that one does look and remind me an awful lot of the Silver Surfer that we've had in here.
It does. You can see the reflections, and the accuracy and detail is getting better. I think this might be the first time that I've seen the charge port door in the correct location.
Yes, it's not quite the round that we would expect, but it's awfully close. And
Right.
The other things that you would look at and think are wrong, spokes in the wheels, hood vanes, stuff like that, pretty close, pretty good.
It's getting better, yes. And I like to think that we're actually teaching and training it on how to properly render these pictures. So
I would hope so. Now on Instagram, for those people who have joined us there, they are just seeing a green screen. They're not seeing the image in the background.
right.
So if you wanted to, you can go to the Gruber Motors YouTube site. I think that's probably our preferred site to
It's a
direct
preferred
people
site.
to.
And we'll be popping up images, so you'll probably want to make that switch. Eventually Instagram will allow us to stream green screen, and it's not us that's holding it up. It's a technical issue on their end. In fact, last week, the podcast, two of them, I think, were dead for Instagram because they had a streaming code problem, and we couldn't stream.
Yeah.
So, but in the meantime, YouTube is your best bet. And then you'll be able to see some of the images we're going to pop up. So this last couple of weeks, 3 more Roadsters are getting listed on our Tesla Roadster matchmaking site. For those of you unfamiliar, it's on our website. It's Roadsters for sale, and it's a free service that we offer to the Roadster community. A lot of people ask about other Model S's, and we're not at the point where we can accept other cars to be listed. But if you click on the submission form and answer those questions and send us some images, we'll be more than happy for no charge. Put your car out there in play. And our role, one of the customers mentioned last week, I thought this was humorous. He says, "Oh, so you're like the Tinder of car sales." I said, yes we are. We are matchmakers. We essentially unite the buyers with sellers and then step out of the way. And you tell us how much contact information you want us to give to potential buyers, whether it's just email, just phone number, or both. And from that point, you have dialogue with the potential buyer. You negotiate your price. We're not involved in that in any way, shape, or form either. And when it's all said and done, just let us know, and we'll take the listing off and put it in our sold section.
In a few cases, sometimes the buyers and sellers are in different states or different areas of the country, and they choose to have us work as an escrow service for them. We provide that service for free as well, where the seller will send the title to us, the buyer will send the funds to us, and once we know that the transaction itself has been complete, we then take the title and funds and send them to the appropriate parties.
Free escrows. Yeah, free escrow service.
It's another free service.
And free transport advice. We subscribe to Central Dispatch, so if you need help getting your Roadster to the buyer, we can assist with that as well. We turn over the bids to you, and then you decide which shipper you want to go with. All right, so Instagram, Medlock129 says thank you. And so for those of you on Instagram, switch over to YouTube, and you can see a whole lot more. There is a high inventory of used Roadsters for sale right now, and it's no secret that they're not selling as briskly as they were a year ago. There are a number of reasons for that. In fact, we were discussing it in the last podcast, economic conditions. You want to elaborate a bit?
Well, yeah, I think the biggest thing is that the interest rates that the Federal Reserve has been jacking up over the last 24 months have really started to take hold in the financing area. And so the automotive industry is finding that demand is soft across the board. What makes the news is that demand for EVs has softened, but the reality is it's not just EVs, it's all automobiles. While it would seem that the Roadster community, which is typically higher net worth individuals that don't need to have financing, would they would be more interested in this, or more immune from the interest rate changes and the suppression of the overall market. The reality is it's hitting the Roadsters as well.
And there's another fundamental reason that so many of these Roadsters are coming up for sale now, and it has to do with health issues. Remember that the people that were able to buy a Tesla Roadster 15 years ago from a company that was on the cusp of bankruptcy were typically people that were well-heeled, that had a lot of disposable income, and that were willing to gamble and take a risk. Those typically aren't your 20, 30-year-olds that are still building a family and, developing their careers, or maybe even still in school.
Right.
So a lot of the people now that are selling Roadsters can't do the Roadster wiggle anymore. Back surgeries, knee surgeries is another big one. And the saddest one is when widows or widowers are selling the cars. And that's also a percentage of sales that are currently going on.
Yeah, and you make such a great point there. It's not just that somebody had the $120,000 necessary to buy the Roadster. It's that they knew that they were putting $120,000 or so at risk on a car that, but they might not be able to drive very much because it would probably just be a garage decoration if anything happened to it. And in many cases that has happened. So they have to have a lot more than just $120,000 set aside.
Right. And, finally, there is another ingredient, which is the pack replacements for brick Roadsters, cars that don't drive anymore because they weren't charged or whatever the problem was. It used to be a $34,000 pack replacement, which compared to the other Tesla models is pretty steep. Remember, a brand new battery pack for a Model S is around $20,000, $22,000.
Right.
The Tesla Roadster at $34,000 kind of hit the bank, or hit their bank account a little bit harder. Now that cost has gone up to $40,000, $45,000. And with the valuation of Roadsters currently, and I'll talk about that later in the podcast, I've got some benchmarks for where valuation has gone. It's difficult to cost justify a $45,000 pack replacement for a car that may be worth only about twice that.
Well, and that same $45,000 can get you another brand new electric car in many cases too.
Right. So we've got a picture here that we can throw up, guys. It's called Cord-1 and Cord-2, and this is a follow-up from the last Roadster podcast. The yellow charge cable, which a lot of people are still using, occasionally develops problems. And if you notice here at the strain relief portion, there's a crimp right there. And this particular charge cable would no longer charge the car. It turns out we suspected that the pilot signal wire, which is the little wire inside there, roughly around 18 gauge or so, that actually controls charging and lets the car know that there's a solid connection to the charge port. We felt that was defective inside that crimp section. So we repair these, and I can assure you that anybody at our shop that is working on these usually is engaged in a lot of profanity because they're very difficult to get apart. We're cussing out the engineers that originally designed them. It's over-engineered, over-designed, and it's not the easiest thing to repair and take apart. Well, this one finally did get repaired, and we had a training session Friday last week, and then I completed it Saturday morning, and most of my cussing was done Saturday without anyone there, so that was probably better than having all the employees there
I
watching me
thought
go
that was
off.
the warning that you gave everybody Monday was that, yes.
So we actually ended up having to make a special tool to take this apart, and I'll describe it to you. There's a large ring nut that's in the front of that connector that recedes down into the barrel and then goes onto a threaded portion. And the way to get this nut off is not with a wrench, because it doesn't have a hex pattern around the outside. It has 4 little holes in it, and you have to have a pin-type wrench that we certainly weren't able to find. We ended up welding up our own and making it, that you insert there, and then you can turn it off. Now, once you're past the threads, you're not home safe yet, because there is an obstruction there and a little slot on that ring nut, and you have to line that slot with the shaft in order to take it off the rest of the way.
Oh, goodness.
Then from there, you can take off the barrel, and now you have a whole bunch of little spring clips that start flying in each direction. And usually, when you're missing one, you look down on the ground, search diligently, and you'll find it. So you've got that going on. But finally, what we ended up doing was we exposed, and they use a lot of thread lock, by the way. That's another problem. In one case, there's a large nut sleeve that you have to heat up in order to get the rest of it off or to unthread it.
Because of the thread lock?
Because of the thread lock.
Yeah, okay.
And then you can expose the wiring. And it's the gauge wire that they're using here was 12 gauge wire, which is good for 20 amps. So once you get that off, you can then slice off the old cable, put a new cable on there. In this particular case, the customer did not feel he needed the upgraded cable. We have yellow cable, by the way, that is now 10 gauge, which is good for 30 amps. And instead of 12 feet, it's 25 feet. And it doesn't have that failure-prone GFI 15 amp plug on the end of it. So typically what customers will do is do a wire or cable upgrade along with it. In this particular case, we just simply cut off the broken portions, which, by the way, is, I don't have it here. I was going to bring it with me. Anyway, just imagine there's a portion of wire that we ended up cutting out of it, kind of like doing surgery and shortening the vein.
Sure.
Happy to report that the yellow charge cable is again functioning for this customer, and we've rescued yet another one.
Is that dark spot on there just a crimp, or did that also heat up?
That's a good point. That may have heated up as well.
Because that to me looks very much like what would happen if you had applied heat to plastic and would cause the plastic to discolor and shrink a little bit.
More than likely, there was some arcing taking place in there as the connection was broken, and then would make a connection again, and the arcing eventually would create some heat.
Yep, absolutely. Okay.
Good point. All right, so anyway, this customer has his yellow charge cable back, and if you're interested in having this kind of an upgrade done, on our e-store, we've got both the repair information and the upgrade information. And it looks like we've got some people joining us. Another Instagram person, Dama Shore, or Damash Hour. He says hello, welcome, thanks
Hi.
for joining us. All right, we've got some pictures here, guys, and if you can bring up the, let's see where we've got that. Yeah, detail undercarriage. We have the lowest mileage Roadster currently in our Roadster matchmaking site. And, earlier this year, we had the 3 Chinese barn find Roadsters. And initially, they were called 0-mile Roadsters. We weren't sure exactly how much mileage was on there. After doing some research, we found that Tesla in 2010 switched from doing a 30-mile test drive on each car before they would go to owners, or roughly, sometimes they're a little higher, to 100 miles because they had some QC problems, and they felt they needed to do a longer test drive to flush out any problems. Turns out all 3 of the Chinese Roadsters were in that later camp, the 100-mile test drive cars, so typically their mileage that was locked into the VMS system was 104 to 130 miles or so.
Right.
This particular car is also bricked, and it actually has 38 miles on the odometer. And the story is that at one point in time, the car went to a Tesla service center in its early years, which was very close by, and that's where the additional 8 miles came from. Then the car got bricked again, and then it sat. And it literally sat in storage for the next 13 years or so. 12 years, actually, in this case.
Yes. And it's such a stunning car.
Yeah. So let's go to some of the detail pictures here, guys, because this is where the shock was for us. And they start at around A, the letter A. Now you can see the underneath of the car here. And Arctic white, of course, it's a tough color to keep clean, as is black. But everything about this car, there we go.
Wow.
That kind of flashing on that control arm is really unheard of because, we spend our days working on Roadsters, many of them throughout the day.
Yeah.
And we never see anything this clean, even after pressure washing, cleaning, wiping things down. This is literally brand new. So let's go forward a bit here and I'll point out some other things. What you're looking at here is where Mark's head is. That is one of the sheet exits where the plumbing goes to keep the sheet cool. This one is remarkable. This is a shot from underneath the car up on the lift. This is the bottom of the door. And again, we never see anything this clean because as you're driving a Roadster, a lot of the road debris, pebbles and sandy parts will eventually chip and eat away at this under portion here. There's actually a aftermarket product that will close that off so you're not getting all of that stuff on your door sill. But this is the underside of the door, and it looks as clean and as polished as some of the painted surfaces on the car.
So this car was obviously not only virtually no miles, it had to have been kept in some sort of like a temperature-controlled garage or something like that.
Absolutely.
Because we saw with the temperature variations on the Chinese Roadsters that they had some very much what we would think of as weathering damage, even though they weren't out in the weather.
Severe temperature cycling is what a couple of the experts pointed out, which is the reason that the PPF on the cars was so cracked and peeling.
Sure.
This car also had some PPF, and the seller decided, let's take this back to bone stock original. Because, again, the PPF on this car was clean. It could have remained on the car.
Sure.
But what happens with the Arctic White Roadsters is PPF yellows with age. And there was a bit of yellowing in this PPF, which really affected the coloration on the car. So let's go forward a bit, and I'll see if there's some other things that we can point out here. This is the other side of the door. Again, we never see anything like this. This is from the inside now, looking at the back of the car. You see that crash structure there, which is like a foam, the yellow foam. We've never seen one this clean. This is brand new from the factory. I think on one side, in the center, there is still a clean white Tesla part number sticker. Let's go to the next image, and I think the next one will show. No, that's... So this is one of the half shafts. What you're looking at here is the rubber boot on the half shaft. These are typically either oozing grease, cracked, of course, dusty, matte finish, and certainly never as clean as this.
Yeah, I mean, that's almost that's a new boot.
It is.
You would not know that is a 12 or 13-year-old boot.
And if you guys proceed one image at a time, they're in alphabetical order, then we can discuss. This is the other side of the half shaft. Again, clean as can be. Now, look at the 4-inch neoprene duct on top. This is what ours look like after we've replaced them. They're usually fissured, dirty, unraveling. This is the original neoprene 4-inch duct that provides cooling to the PEM heat sinks up on top. And again, it looks as new as the ones that we put in the cars. Keep on going, guys. All right, now here's something else that's highly unusual. On that shaft, you see the original white sticker from the factory with the part number. And again, you just don't see things this clean once a car has been driven, gone through a bit of rain, snow, dust, dirt, whatever it is. And all of the components that you're seeing here are underneath skid plates. So typically, even if you go through a car wash, this portion of the car does not get cleaned.
I mean, literally one trip around the block on a wet road, and this would all be completely different and compromised.
Yeah. There we go. Again, another one of those examples of a sticker. This is the transaxle housing shown from the bottom. You can see even the rubber parts here look shiny and new. And I'm not sure whether anyone back in the day, oh, here's the other side of that crash structure, and you can see how clean that is. I'm not sure that anyone back in the day, let's talk about this for a moment. This is the skid plate, and this is the inside portion, which typically when you drive your cars, collects dirt, dust, stains, and is discolored. This is what this particular skid plate looked like on the inside. The outside was even cleaner. And a little bit later here, we'll see pictures of the car taken up on a lift with the camera from down below. And my point that I started to make was back in the day when they were manufacturing these, they had cell phones, certainly. They might have had cameras on them.
Maybe,
but I don't think that people took pictures at this level, because in the community, the Roadster community, I've never seen this type of detail on a Tesla Roadster. By the way, if any of you out there are watching, we'd certainly like for you to chime in and let us know if you have any of these types of pictures.
I would think, I think back 15 years, okay, I'm dealing with my iPhone 3, because I did have one of the earlier iPhones. I think it had a 1 megapixel camera on it. Maybe it was a fancy one that had a 2 megapixel, and you just didn't think of taking pictures yet like this.
Right.
The whole novelty of a camera on your phone was still kind of a novelty.
Still a novelty, yeah. So here's a license plate holder. Let's go to the next one, guys. You were there. Here we're looking at the front of the car. This is the front lip. And try as you may, you're not going to avoid hitting an occasional speed bump that scrapes the bottom of your car or a curb. This car is absolutely immaculate. There are no scratch marks on the bolts, on the skid plate. It is as clean as it gets. Again, we don't see this. There are cars right next to it that look completely different than this. There's a better detail shot. I think this is the part where we start showing the undercarriage of the car. No, okay, now we're looking at the control arms, the idler arm, and you can see how immaculate this is.
Now, what is that red?
The red, okay, that is epoxy. Lotus actually glued the Tesla Roadster frames together along with pop rivets. And you may say, wow, that doesn't sound very safe, does it? It turns out that in collision damaged cars, you'll see the aluminum rip oftentimes before the epoxy rips. It is an extraordinarily powerful bonding agent, probably the type that was designed on the molecular level, kind of like super glue.
Sure.
And that's what all that orange is all about. And they were liberal in its application.
Yes,
recognizing
definitely.
It would be the bottom of the car. Who's going to care if you get a few brush marks? But just everything on this car is a marvel in terms of its newness, cleanliness, and its detail. From rubber parts to flash parts. All right, here we go. Here we're laying underneath the car, getting shots of the entire undercarriage. Our feeling was that anybody that would be interested in buying a car like this is going to buy it for its uniqueness. I can't imagine, again, that anyone would want to put a car like this back on the road, put some mileage on it, and destroy its uniqueness in terms of 38 miles. All of our guys actually stood around looking at this because we're used to working on these cars and they're never this clean. Even the dual fans there in the back, they've been pumping air for a number of years.
It looks like it just came out of the factory.
Exactly. Yes, that was what we kept saying. This is just like Tesla just delivered this after building this car. So this is definitely a statement. It is impeccable in every way. And it's a vehicle that's been more than preserved. It's been enshrined, as our ad states.
I know the Chinese Roadsters didn't end up going to Tesla showrooms.
Mm-hmm.
This would be such a good candidate for something like that.
It would be, yes. You see the orange cables there in that previous picture. These are the three-phase power cables that come off of the drive motor and go up to the PEM. And again, they're never this clean. They're never this unstained. And, even the Chinese Roadsters, remember, there were rodents that lived in them.
Yes.
And a lot of the flashing that you see here that is impeccable and perfect was not in the Chinese Roadsters because the discharge from the rodents was oftentimes caustic, acidic in some way, and affected the plating on some of these parts.
Mm-hmm.
These motors here, the dual fan motors for the PEM, look like the ones we have in stock. They were that clean.
Yeah.
So for anyone interested in this Roadster, it is out on the Roadster matchmaking site. There is one bid on it already. It's $100,000. And it will, I'm fairly certain, go much higher than that because $100,000 is about what you would get a normal driving Roadster for in impeccable condition.
Yeah, and
this day and age.
And I know we can't disclose anything on the Chinese Roadsters. I know that they went for a little bit more than this, though.
Yes, yeah. But every picture that you see here on this site is a confirmation that this car was unused. And definitely a showroom level car. At Pebble Beach, when they restore cars, they do restorations to this level.
Mm-hmm.
And it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to get to this kind of level because they have to replate, repaint, refinish, and eventually you end up with a car like this. This one needs nothing.
No.
It's ready to go.
But I agree with you. This is probably one that does not get a new battery pack ever because it probably will sit and, again, become garage furniture somewhere or hopefully go to a museum or a collector or something like that.
YouTube, Herbert Booter says, "Hi, guys, I'm still here." Well, thank you.
Thanks,
for
Huber.
remaining
Glad
with
to
us.
have you with us on this portion of the podcast as well.
How's your Roadster doing, by the way? Yeah, let us know. We have another Roadster coming in with rodent damage, and for some reason, these things tend to come in spurts. This one, the rodents got into not only the running board, it appears, but into the dash. And it's not going to be a large rodent. You're not going to get a squirrel, a rabbit, or anything pack rat. These are probably going to be mice, or gerbils. No, I guess gerbils aren't in the wild, are they?
I don't think they are, no.
Or somebody's gerbil got away and took up residence in their Roadster in the garage.
And 6 weeks later, you had 3 million gerbils out in the world.
Right. And of course, they wreak havoc. They are going to do a couple of things. They're going to attempt to eat anything that is flavorful for them, and soy-based wire insulation tends to be something that they'll actually attempt to digest. But they also chew into other things, and the purpose of that is for nesting material, not just because they're going to have babies, but because they want to create a nice, warm, cozy place for themselves to sleep.
Right.
So it is damaging, very damaging. In fact, this one that's coming in now, they got into the switch pack wiring harness, and it's doing all kinds of strange things. It's turning on things that it shouldn't. It won't power down correctly. So we've got another one of those cases where we're going to have to find where the rodents took residence and how far they got into the car. It's not cheap, folks, because it's a lot of troubleshooting. It's a lot of restoring wiring harnesses and, using equipment to find where the signals are getting mixed up or where they're missing completely. Again, the preventative measures that you can take, and we talked about this, some people suggested mothballs. Well, that works good on the outside of the car. If you put it inside the cabin, it's going to smell like your grandmother's closet.
Right.
And who wants to smell that? You know, I mean, although it's reminiscent of grandma, you know, some people use Febreze. It's a fabric softener. And apparently any strong smells like that are like kryptonite to certain types of rodents.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have pepper sprays and jalapeno type fluids. Again, it's difficult to administer. My recommendation is get yourself a barn cat. Get something that and don't feed it well.
Right.
That's going to be probably one of your best deterrents. And then, of course, make sure that the Roadster doesn't sit unattended for long periods of time, because if you're actively using your Roadster, the rodents are going to be less inclined, feeling that it's safe haven for them.
Exactly. Even if a Roadster moves a couple of feet, or a product, it doesn't even have to be a Roadster. If a product moves a couple of feet every couple of weeks, your rodents are going to think, uh-oh, something's going on, and it'll take them a long time to get used to the idea of being able to go in there, because they'll think that it's not safe.
Right. So if we can bring up another picture, guys, and this one is called Foreman. And we brought this one up actually last week. This is a Haggerty auction that's still live. It's George Foreman's sterling silver Roadster. It is a 2008 Roadster, and somewhere there it should tell us what the VIN is. It was $32,000 on a no-reserve auction last week, and this week it's up to $36,000. The caveat here is, and Haggerty's done a pretty good job of adding to the full disclosure. Originally, this was touted as a 400-something mile car. And then Carfax said, no, not really, because we've got a range, or we've got a mileage that's higher than that. 447 was the original listing. And then it turns out that even after that Carfax report, there was some service activity on this car. So at this point, the mileage is being described as unknown. So I wouldn't bank on expecting to get a very low mileage Roadster here. And without the type of equipment and diagnostics that we have in our laptops, where we can tune into the car and basically reveal its log files, there is no easy way for this auction house to extract the actual mileage. Which is probably an idea for some of these auction houses. If you want to contract people like us that have the capability to fly out there, wake up the car with 12 volts, and then do a deep dive into the log files and tell you exactly what's going on with the car, when it was bricked, what kind of failures occurred when it bricked. Was it just, was it just negligence, not being charged, or was there a technical problem that caused that, which means you're going to have some additional repairs after the pack replacement? And then finally, extract the actual mileage and the CAC before it went down. Those are all things that companies like us can do. But in the meantime, this is being sold as a no-reserve auction. The condition of the car, there have been some people weighing in. They found missing knobs, for example, and there were some scratches in the paint. The car is going to complete in 8 days from today, so we'll see what this car sells for. What it has going for it is a celebrity-owned car. If we consider George Foreman, the guy with the grills and flipping burgers and all that, a celebrity. And someone in the last podcast pointed out that he was a preacher at one point in his previous life.
He was in ministry for a while. Of course, was heavyweight boxing champion for a while. Had one of the more famous fights with Muhammad Ali. In his early career, had a second comeback about 10 years later, where he actually got all the way up. He wanted to fight Mike Tyson for the heavyweight championship.
Really?
And Mike Tyson was beaten by Buster Douglas and kind of fell out of the sport before George Foreman got his chance.
Gotcha.
And so he did become heavyweight champion a second time many years later, though.
My first question is, how did he fit into the Roadster?
That's a great question. He's a big man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it did say that he's got a number of sons. They're all named George. There are like 4 of them or 5 of them or something like that. And maybe the
I think
other
5.
boys were driving his Roadster.
Well, it would be George Foreman driving the Roadster regardless.
TikTok. We've got a question here from Wathy_UCK. What happens? Oh, I get it. All right. The guys over here like it when I read, like Ron Burgundy. He says, what happens when you run out of energy? How bad is that to the EV? Well, to the later model Tesla vehicles, it doesn't mean a thing because there's a contactor that opens up and protects your battery pack.
Right.
In a Tesla Roadster, when you run out of energy, you better hope that you get to a charging station quickly. If it's too far gone at that point, then you have to have what's called a battery recovery. And you get a couple months or so unless somebody knows how to pull your service plug on the Tesla Roadster battery pack, which is what in later models was automated with a contactor opening up. If you can pull that service plug, now you've bought all kinds of time, 6 months to a year, and we can recover that battery pack.
And for level 1 recoveries, there are some Tesla service centers that have started doing that for the Roadsters again.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right, for the Model S, what we see when a resistive cell occurs in a Model S battery, for example, there are these famous errors, the BMS U018 and the U029 errors that'll come up. And basically they mean that a cell is going resistive in the Tesla Model S battery pack.
Mm-hmm. So yes, with a Roadster, you definitely want to continuously keep it charged and don't get down below or to 0 miles range. All right, we've got another folder here, guys. If you guys can pop up the Visium folder. And there has been some discussion on some of the Tesla Roadster Facebook sites regarding, excuse me, the Italian Visium top, which instead of the soft top, is a Lexan plexiglass type top. And unlike the hard top, which is fairly thick, this is thinner. And people that have bought these, if they're extremely tall, found that they get a little bit extra headroom with the Visium top.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay.
And, driving some of these, it's also cool because you end up getting some light inside the cabin. It's kind of like opening the moonroof, or at least drawing back the curtain on the moonroof so that you get some filtered light coming into your car. The problem that's been occurring with this Italian product is, and people are buying these typically off of eBay. If you're interested, we have the direct vendor, and we'll be more than happy to email you their contact information if you email us at ev@gruber.com. The form and the fitment of these is starting to get compromised a bit. And if we take a look at the next picture here, guys, picture number 1, you can see the back of the Visium top, and there's a little bit of a gap there from the corner to the middle. Mm-hmm. This typically translates into some air noise and possibly water ingress. If you go to the picture number 2, you can see the gap there is about 3/16 of an inch or so. And the front, however, picture number 3, was a good fit. There was no problem there. I don't know how the vendor is responding to any requests for replacement if you've got one of these fitment issues. This particular car came in last week for shock replacement, and we've seen the car before. And in the meantime, the customer had bought one of these Visium tops. Overall, he's very happy with it. But again, word to the wise, make sure that you don't have a fitment problem and that you check carefully into what your warranty is. TikTok, Raf Blue says, which Teslas are doomed if the ECU board dies? Well, none of them really. The MCU on the later model Teslas, I'm assuming that's what we're talking about, media control unit.
Yeah.
are replaceable. In fact, the first problem was there was an 8 gig chip in there, eMMC chip, which was undersized. And with the all additional firmware updates as it grew, it was no longer able to handle all the traffic because there's constant reporting taking place, recording, telemetry being collected from all of the CAN devices in the car. The fix that we had for that was upgrading it to a 64 gig chip, and that solved a lot of problems. So we went from 8 gig to 64. Then came the MCU2, which again was more robust than the MCU1. And remember, Tesla doesn't rest on their laurels. They're constantly increasing the size of the operating system, basically. And as that happens, it's kind of like going from your XT computer to a Windows-based computer. You had to have more memory and more horsepower.
Yeah, instead of having a few files that sit on a floppy disk and you had room for your work, now you're talking about you go from that to 6 floppies to a CD-ROM to a DVD to, well, you can't even do a DVD anymore.
And of course, a bigger hard drive eventually, which fortunately kept on increasing in storage capacity.
Same thing. It's the car equivalent of the bloat that you find in software.
Yeah. All right. One of the other items that we have here, and we listened to the community, the Roadster community, to get some of these tips and ideas. And this particular one is from a Texas customer, Scott Weber. And he had been complaining about his key fobs not working reliably. One of the indications that he mentioned is that the distance that it would actually actuate and do something with the car was being reduced as it aged. So being an engineer, he decided to fix this himself. We have some pictures here, guys. If we can throw up a picture, let's see here, under images. All right, maybe I don't have it here. I thought I did. Well, trust me on this. No, it's up there. 2023-1207. And what we're going to show you here is some pictures that he posted on
two
Facebook.
of those. Matter which one? Both of them?
I only see one, but the one ending in 256.
All right.
So what he ended up doing here is he took off the cover on the fob, which, by the way, anybody can do because you have a battery underneath there. See that little battery? I think it's a 2036, which you should change routinely, every year or so. We do it as a matter of standard practice when a Roadster comes in. It's part of our outtake on the cars. We change the batteries and the key fobs. So he removed the battery holder and then took it apart or split it by removing some screws, and then he lifted out the circuit boards, or the circuit board. And what he found there was it was dirty and loaded with flux. So he cleaned it with a small brush and acetone. Acetone, by the way, is a great way to get rid of solder flux. We use it routinely. It doesn't hurt anything, and it certainly cleans the circuit board so that you can clearly see the etches again. And then he actually reheated one of his connections to the battery holder, the 8-pin dip, transmitter, transistors, and most of the other contacts. Now, at this point, we're probably getting beyond the capabilities of most owners because you've got to have a pencil soldering iron here and have some solder and definitely some skills in soldering. There's some surface mount components on here that you definitely don't want to touch with just a solder gun. But he was happy to report when he was done, it now works 100% and at a distance much farther than it used to. What we typically find with these key fobs is it's a combination of age, dust, dirt, sometimes loose connections, or sometimes even water damage. Because remember, this key may have been dropped in a puddle at one point in time and you get some water ingress.
Right.
And when you plug this thing in, you've got some voltages running on here. Once you put voltages along with the moisture, now you get what's called electrolysis. And electrolysis can be conductive, copper oxide, for example. So doing a good cleaning like this definitely preserves this little key fob. Now, the reason this is important, we've been looking for the vendor that made these now for a few years. and they are not on the planet anymore, it appears. And trying to get a vendor to recreate a part like this for 25, 50 makes this a $500 key fob. And of course, there aren't enough customers out there that are going to be buying these from us for us to make that hefty a commitment where we would buy 5 or 10,000 of these.
Well, and I'm thinking at 25 or 50, $500 would be really cheap.
Probably, yes. Yeah, to recreate, and the plastic molds and all of that, you know. Now, we haven't given up trying to find the original vendor for these, and we're tapping into the existing Tesla people, the ex-Tesla people, and we've even gone to Matt Windle, who is still the plant manager at Lotus in the UK. Initially, he thought, I can help with that because I think we're using it on the production line. It turns out that he reported a few days later, this was one of the items that Tesla said, we got this. We're going to take care of this one, so we don't need your key fob. And now we don't know where that vendor is or whether they're even still in business.
Yeah, if only Tesla could add the schematics to the public domain for this key fob that they did with so much of the rest of the car.
Right. Yeah, that would be wonderful. By the way, Tesla did say there's more documentation coming.
Yes.
So they're not done yet. So yeah, you're right. Maybe at some point in the future, we'll get a huge surprise and something like this will pop up.
That would certainly be nice.
All right, another Facebook post. This one was from someone overseas. And they said, can someone please remind me the code to enter the service menu on the 1.5 Roadster? Now, first of all, the 1.5 and 2.x Roadsters have the same password, security code. And the way you invoke it is you click 5 to 7 times in a non-interactive portion of the VDS screen, and a diagnostic password entry screen will pop up. Then you type in 1050. And if you need to remember where that came from, it was one of their first addresses, 1050 Bing Street. That's how I remember it. And once you do that, now you have access to the holy grail of Tesla Roadster. Now, I remember in 2015 or 16 or so, for a while there was the notion that no one should ever reveal this top secret password.
Yes.
So the owners were not allowed to get in and do things like reset your service interval. You know, that annoying thing that comes up every year and says maintenance required, right? By going into this level, you can disable that. Not disable it, but put it out there for another year. Reset it. Exactly. Yeah. But we were very daring back then by creating a newsletter that actually revealed the top secret password. And we got a lot of flack. There were people in the community that emailed us, how dare you? This is owners should not be allowed in this restricted area. And every time we would ask why, what kind of damage could they do? No one had a clear-cut answer. But again, it was the Holy Grail. It was the inner sanctum. It was what was the Ark of the Covenant, right?
Oh, yes,
that should not be breached.
Yes.
So for those of you interested that don't remember this podcast, there is a newsletter out there on our website under newsletters that will tell you how to access this and how to get in there, and then also give you a bunch of cool things that you can look at and do there, just like the technicians used to do. So 1050 for those of you curious. All right, we've got another picture here we can throw up, guys. And for this one, we're going to have to go to the first podcast images folder. I just realized where I left it. What we're going to bring up here is a picture of Nikola Tesla and an interesting story that, and I'm going to call this a story because none of this has been corroborated.
Okay. But that picture, as it's getting ready to come up, it looks like it's AI generated. Mm-hmm. In general, seems to be a really good picture. But one of my favorite things to do is to critique it. There's the picture there. Where does he have room to stand with his left leg?
Good point.
I just gotta wonder. By and large, this is an excellent generated picture.
There's a headlight there, isn't there?
There's a headlight right there, and you don't see his leg. You just don't see it.
So allegedly, and I'm going to use those qualifiers often in this story, allegedly, the most commonly reported Tesla early electric car was a converted Pierce Arrow from 1931. And if you notice, AI did a great job replicating a very popular image of Nikola Tesla on that picture poster behind him.
Mm-hmm.
The foreground picture, yeah, it's a reasonable facsimile of Nikola Tesla, what he may have looked like at one point in his life. So this is a 1931 Pierce Arrow electric car conversion. And this can be found in the Secrets of the Cold War Technology, it says, where Tesla allegedly said, "I have just turned my attention to electricity as one subject amongst others." The car's engine was an 80 horsepower furnace, they called it. It had 2 thick cables connected to the dashboard, and it also stored 12 volts for accessories like lights or electronics. Well, there weren't any electronics in 1931, so that
Correct.
part of the article is incorrect. Not even vacuum tubes back then, I don't think. So maximum speed for the rotating magnetic field was stated to be 30 turns per second. A 6-foot antenna rod was fitted into place in Dr. Tesla's car, and it is unknown whether any other adjustments were made while he was driving. But luckily, he had someone on hand who knew what they were doing. The person put together an elaborate power receiver that could pick up 12 different types of tubes from transmitters placed around Europe, so if anything ever happened out there during World War II, plans would still get completed. Now, there's another confusing aspect. 1931 car. Well, World War II was,
1941.
Yeah.
Or 1939 to start it, but yes.
So the car must have survived a decade or more. But the bottom line here is, allegedly Nikola Tesla was able to harness microwave energy from the sun to power this car. And Dr. Tesla's nephew, they say, was able to drive this vehicle without any other fuel for an undetermined long period of time. No sound, and it didn't even move when you turned the key. So anyway, there you have it. I don't know how accurate any of this is, but it's intriguing nonetheless. And again, it places Nikola Tesla near a alleged electric car during World War II.
Well, and if true, I would say this is not necessarily the first electric car as much as it is potentially the first solar car.
Right.
Because even though it's microwave and not UV radiation, it is picking up radiation from the sun.
Mm-hmm.
And powering itself.
And like we said earlier, below the visible light spectrum, which would be microwave.
Yeah, but I would have to. I just don't know if this is a true story or not, because microwave technology I thought was developed or discovered by accident in the 1950s, when a scientist who was working on one of the lunar projects realized that his candy bar in his pocket had melted because when he was standing in front of the transmitter.
He received that much radiation.
He received that much radiation.
Yeah.
And so if that's true, then this probably is not, because microwave technology will not have been discovered by then. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's worth verifying, and it's a fun story regardless.
It is, nonetheless, yes. Facebook, Todd Edwards joined us. He says, just discovered you guys on your last video. Thanks for educating and sharing knowledge. Well, except for that last story, our educating is definitely on track. This is more of a
entertainment.
Entertainment story, yes.
And on TikTok, Blinky Striping says he's straddling the fender. Possibly. If you look at the passenger side, what would be the fender as compared to the driver's side, it's almost like it doesn't have a fender. The fender comes up to the back of him and then stops.
Yes. And this, of course, is where AI occasionally hallucinates, but the rest of it is pretty compelling, from shading to detail, and the fact that it rendered a reasonable facsimile of a very popular Nikola Tesla picture.
Yeah, I'm by and large, I'm just very impressed with this picture.
All right, so getting back to Roadster, information. We see a lot of Roadsters for sale. On the Roadster matchmaking site, I think there are probably over 100 now between sold cars and cars currently for sale. So we're getting a pretty good glimpse as to what valuation is, even though we're not typically involved in the end result of any negotiation. So here's some of the valuation statistics that I've assembled for you this morning. What is a running, pristine Tesla Roadster selling for these days? Mm-hmm. And the target I have there is about $100,000 to $110,000. Now, this is for a car that has no deferred maintenance. And, the suspension has been upgraded. The PEM has been rebuilt. It may still have the legacy battery pack, but it doesn't need paint improvement. It doesn't have any curb rash. There's no headlight rash. The paint is corrected and near perfect. It is optioned with carbon fiber, hardtop. Not a hardtop carbon fiber, but I mean it has a hardtop and some carbon fiber elements. If it has a carbon fiber hardtop, then you can increase that valuation a bit more because those were not common. They were pretty rare as well. It has accessories that come with a car. The Can Junior, the Can Senior. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's an original Tesla Roadster soft top, which were also, these days becoming collectible. It may have a wall charger. The TS70 Clipper Creek wall charger may come with the car. And, of course, low mileage. No 50,000 mile plus cars in this group. It could be 5,000, 10,000, maybe 15, somewhere in that range. Sure. Unfortunately, the same car that I just described would typically in the past sell for $130,000. But because the market being the way that it is right now and an overabundance of used Roadsters for sale and interest rates being high, mm-hmm. That's about what we're finding that this type of Roadster would fetch. Now, let's go to deferred maintenance cars. And this is a car that has some paint issues. It's going to need a paint correction. Not a repaint, mind you, because that's far more expensive. The PEM is not rebuilt. Nothing. No one has looked at the electronics and rebuilt any of that. It doesn't have the options like carbon fiber on the inside, on the outside. It's not a sport Roadster. I left that out in the first description. A sport Roadster will typically fetch a bit more.
Sure. And
2.0 Roadsters or 2.x Roadsters, people tend to favor those unless you're getting down into the 1.5s toward the Signature. And we'll talk about that in a moment as well. So the deferred maintenance cars, where you know you're going to need some shocks and some suspension work, and it's going to need some electronics work. It might need the seats reupholstered. Now we're looking in the $75,000 to $95,000 range. Again, a functioning running car.
Right.
A bricked car. Now, this is one that's dead, not driving anymore. And it's going to need that $45,000 pack replacement from Tesla. There you're looking at a $40,000 car, maybe $50,000, because anybody looking at that car is going to immediately do some math and say, I've got to put $45,000 in this car, and they're going to add that to your asking price.
So best case, your really pristine Roadster with a brick battery might fetch you $55,000.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then the deviations from anything that I've just said are signature cars, Signature 100, Signature 250 in Europe. Those cars are becoming collectible. And oftentimes, prospective buyers are willing to look the other way when it comes to deferred maintenance, or whether it needs a battery or not. Mm-hmm. And honestly, all bets are off there. I mean, I've seen some sell on Bring a Trailer just because they had a pedigree. And then others that didn't have a pedigree, but had just gotten a $45,000 pack installed the month before, got up to $90,500. So all bets are off when it comes to deviations such as signature cars, celebrity-owned cars. We have a car right now, and I'll give you that story here in a minute. It was Dustin Hoffman's car, VIN number 163. That's going to go up for sale. It's bricked, and we'll talk about it here in a moment. Mm-hmm. I have no idea what that will sell for. Or who's going to come along and say, I want that car?
Yeah.
This reminds me of a story, how I got into my first Roadster in 2013, 2014. I knew I wanted to get away from Priuses because my wife and I had gone to hybrid cars. And my muscle car days were over, although I still had some. But I wanted to be responsible and drive something that was much greener than my 68 Dodge Charger, which sprayed gasoline out the tailpipe and got 10 miles to the gallon. So I started to look for something fun that was BEV, battery electric vehicle. Wanted to get away from hybrids, wanted to go 100% battery, and eventually landed on Tesla Roadsters. And I thought, wow, these are cool cars. So back then, if you wanted to buy a Tesla Roadster, you went on eBay.
Right.
Lots of them used to sell on eBay. Found one that I liked. It was a black Tesla Roadster, 2008. And talked to the person selling it, and he was a publicist. He says, well, now, this is a celebrity-owned car, and like most celebrities, they don't like their identity revealed, so all you can do is maybe guess, but if I told you who it was, which I can't do, you'd immediately know who it was. Well, it didn't take much for me to put two and two together. It was George Clooney's car.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I forget the VIN now. But anyway, I decided before I fly to California, I was ready to do that, to look at the car. And I had heard that it was one of the problematic early Roadsters that, George was often stranded on the side of the road. I think it was VIN number 8.
Okay.
Yeah. Cass, you can probably fact check that in our Roadster registry under celebrity-owned cars. So anyway, before I flew there, I decided I've got a friend in town here that had a 2011 Lightning Green Roadster. Celebrity owned, actually. It used to belong to Bubba Watson, the famous golfer.
Oh, okay.
Or was famous golfer at the time. I don't know if he still
he,
is.
he was at the time anyway.
Yeah. So we spoke. I said, how do you like the Roadster? What do you think? He says, well, I love it, except the airbag won't turn off in the passenger seat. And I've got 2 little girls, and for safety reasons, I'm going to be selling the car. So we struck a deal. And that's how I ended up with Bubba Watson's 2011 Lightning Green car. So anyway, had I known at the time that celebrity cars are going to be worth a lot, I'm not sure I would have picked Bubba's car because I don't think he's as famous as George Clooney.
Right.
But I couldn't make that determination at the time. So celebrity cars will change the valuation. 2016 R80 cars. 2021, I got that transposed. Those will affect valuation because that's the next generation 3.0 upgrade.
Right. Now, that's the Generation 2 3.0
Exactly.
battery, not the Gen 1 3.0 battery.
Which to date has not manifested any kind of the end-of-life symptoms that a 2016 first generation R80 pack has.
Okay.
And then finally, the 2016 upgrades they're becoming like brick cars. Even though you've got a 2016 battery in it and it's still driving and it's lost some power, people realize that the eventual outcome is going to be a bricked car that's no longer drivable.
So they're discounting the price of the car by the cost of the battery, even though it's still a driving car.
Exactly. Yes.
Makes sense.
So those are our thoughts regarding valuation on Roadsters currently. And those, if you guys can bring up a picture. It's called the Dustin picture. And this is VIN number 163, which Dustin owned for a period of time. And the current owner of the car, this is kind of an interesting story, bought this on eBay. That's where you bought Roadsters back then.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. And there's Dustin. And if you notice, he knew that he was going to be on our podcast at some point in the future, so he put his sunglasses on. Did you guys catch that? All right. And there he is smiling, say, Pete, you're absolutely right. We need sunglasses to be on this podcast. So the customer bought this 2008 Tesla Roadster about 10 years ago. So, all right. He said, now this is his wife talking. I remember it was around bedtime. My husband was checking his phone and started chuckling uncontrollably. I asked, what's so funny? He replied, I think I just bought a car. He completely forgot that a few months back, he put a bid on eBay for a Roadster, never thinking he would get it. Do you know how they have the buy it now, and then they have make offer, and you throw a number out there? And, if you don't hear from them for a few weeks or a month, you figure, they didn't accept it, right?
Yeah.
Well, this is one of those cases where he got the car. That fateful day, December night of 2013, he received notification that he won the bid and was now the owner of an iconic Tesla Roadster. I couldn't believe it. He just bought a car over the internet. Normally you drive out, you see it, you talk to the customer and all that. Well, anyway, her husband loves driving the car, showing it off. It's definitely eye candy and a head turner. That's before people even realized that this was Dustin's car. Oh, what was the VIN, by the way, Cass?
It was VIN number 8, and that was George Clooney's car.
It was 8. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. She says he's gotten many compliments and enthusiastic honks, especially from the younger generation who are drawn to the flashy and unusual. And the fact that the car belonged to Dustin Hoffman is a pretty impressive plus. Well, we are working on getting that car listed this morning, actually. And it will be out on our Roadster matchmaking site. What I can tell you about the car is it is currently bricked. It is a 2016 R80 battery that is bricked. Doesn't make any difference. I mean, Tesla, to put it back on the road, is just going to put another R80 pack in it, but the newer generation.
Right.
It does have some deferred maintenance. It does not have a PEM upgrade. It has the peeling headlights. The paint could use some correction. It is a black on black with a tan insert in the seats. It has some carbon fiber on it. And for those of you interested in getting into a celebrity car and possibly the deferred maintenance, reducing the value a bit, this might just be your car. So we'll have a lot of great pictures out there within the next couple of days that you can review, and this car will be available.
What a cool story that one is. Now, anything else that we have for today, Pete?
That's it. And we're running on an hour here, so this might be a good time to close out the Roadster podcast.
Well, thank you guys so much for being with us. We will be here again next week, 10 a.m. Tuesday for the EV Gruber Morning Show, and then 11 for the Roadster podcast.
And thank you for joining us.